Good afternoon. My name is Dave Norton from Discovering New England History, and I'm bringing to you a new show about the Hindenburg. And you folks may ask me, what's that got to do with New England history? And believe me, it does. It all happened in 1937. And if you go back in history once in a while, all your major newspapers, actually across the country, they always print copies of their headlines, the greatest headlines they ever ran. Of course, you've got Pearl Harbor, you've got the Kennedy assassination they always print, and one of the other ones they always print is the Hindenburg. And I did some research. I got a copy of from the Providence Journal, the front page here of the Hindenburg. And this is the paper that unbelievable when this happened. And so we're going to tell the entire story, something that I don't think anyone's ever done entirely on TV. So to begin with, we'll go to the first slide. And what is a Hindenburg? Well, they're called a Zeppelin. And basically in 1900, German Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, he developed this ship, and it's a rigid structure ship as opposed to a blimp, which is basically, think of it as a balloon just with air in it. This has a steel superstructure on the inside of it. So he pioneered the first rigid airship, and what they used back in the day was hydrogen to get it up in the air. And on this picture I took, that's the first one, you can see I circled, the lead circle there is where the captain would be, and in the back are where the passengers. None of the passengers were inside, like we're going to show you a big advance on this German Hindenburg. Now, who in the world is von Hindenburg? Well, he was a field marshal in the German army in World War I. And after the war, he became president of Germany, 1925 to 1934. And he was just an incredible figure that the entire German country united behind. And so they named this Hindenburg after him. And it is, in fact, to this date, the largest airship ever constructed. Now, back in 1936, a year before the famous Hindenburg voyage, this is how people got across the Atlantic Ocean. There's only two ways. Passenger airlines did not cross the Atlantic Ocean until 1939. So in 1936, the only way you could get from Europe to the United States was either the Queen Mary or this new Hindenburg. And I did a comparison here to give you an idea of scope and size. Queen Mary, 1,000 feet in length. Hindenburg, 804. Speed of the Queen Mary, 30 knots or 35 miles per hour. Hindenburg, 84 miles per hour. So therefore, because the Hindenburg goes that much quicker, crossing the Atlantic, it takes 5 days in the Queen Mary and only 1.9 days to cross it in the Hindenburg. And there's a picture of the Hindenburg above, and there's a picture of the Queen Mary. That's it. That's the only way you could cross the Atlantic Ocean. And we go to the next slide, and this is actually a Hindenburg poster. And I'm showing you this because they have, where I circled it, there are 16 individual gas bags, all filled with hydrogen, not helium, hydrogen. And that's how they control it. We'll go to the next slide. And we're going to go over here, basically, start from the beginning over in Germany. You can see the whole superstructure. This is inside of it. You can see it's all made out of an aluminum material. They began the construction in March of 1932. And it's this new material which Germany had and nobody else had, was duralumin, which is a aluminum copper alloy. And to give you an idea how big the superstructure is, The picture on the right is inside Germany, the hangar where this wall goes. And I got a circle there of an average-sized man on the scaffold working on it. Incredible. And that picture of the steel on the left there, that's what they had, all these individual pieces. And of course, they're all lightweight. You want to have the lightest weightage you can get away with. And here's another shot of the superstructure inside the hangar. And like I said, this is a rigid construction as opposed to a Goodyear blimp, for instance, which is just basically helium in it and blown up. And that's what makes this one an incredible engineering feature. Now, some of these pictures are really quite interesting that I came up with. This is over in Germany, and this is how the men are working on scaffolding inside the Hindenburg. Can you imagine all those structural pieces, and they all have to be wired together, and they all were engineering tested to withstand certain structures and temperatures and everything else. I mean, Germany was way ahead of anybody else at this time in history. And how do you get inside there for maintenance? I wanted to show this here. And the picture on the right, or actually on the left, is a fellow standing on this very narrow walkway inside of it, okay? And the picture on the right shows that it goes the whole length of inside the Hindenburg. I've got a red arrow to show that's where you would be walking. Now, it behooves you to stay on this if you're maintenance and there's a problem, you have to fix it while it's in flight, for instance, over the Atlantic Ocean. So if you'll notice there, I had a red circle with a blue on the inside in between the two structures there. If you get off this, for some reason, fall, whatever you're doing on the Hindenburg, you're going to go right through the side and right down into the Atlantic Ocean. They say that the that the covering that they have at it will hold up an average person, but I really wouldn't want to test that or even go near that type of situation. And what are they doing here? Here they're putting the outer skin on it, and it's a cloth material. It's what they call cloth doped, and it's a reflective aluminum compound. And you can see I got two arrows. The top arrow shows a scaffolding, and they're putting the material on it, and the bottom layer is someone else. They actually brush it on, if you will, and it coats the entire outer skin of it. And the idea is for your protection from the sun's ultraviolet and infrared rays. You don't want that destroying this, especially when you're in flight. And I got the arrow on the top. Can you imagine this? I mean, this is up near the top of it. These fellows are putting their second coat of this material on there. And they've got a ladder way up on the top. And look at this workman. He's got his two hands on this, doing the painting here, the spray painting, if you will. And he's just not even holding on to the ladder, just standing with his 2 feet way up 7 stories high. It's amazing. Like I said, it took 5 years for them to develop and put this all together. Now let's look inside the where the captains are in the control center, and that's a great picture. It has been colorized. And on the left is the captain, Max Pruss, and on the right is another captain, Ernst Lehmann. Ernst had more experience, but he's along with Captain Pruss on this particular flight. Now, the operation limits, you're saying basically, how in the world does this get off the ground and how do they maintain it and control it? It's really interesting. The normal cruising altitude is 650 feet, which is very low. And the lowest cruising altitude is 330. And why do they do it? Number one, so the passengers can get a real good view of what they're going over. But secondly, the idea was, number three here, is to avoid clouds. Clouds are where your thunderstorms are, and you don't want a thunderstorm threat while you're in flight. And there's a pressure height too, 650 feet. If you get over 650 feet, you will have structural problems with the Hindenburg. And how do you lower the airship and how do you raise the airship? Well, you release hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas, of course, is lighter than air, so you release some of the gas and it would lower the airship. Then they have a whole series of water tanks inside that, and if you release some water, obviously the weight of the ship goes down and you raise the airship. But of course there's a risk of fire if hydrogen now, which they're using, is released above the pressure height, especially in an electricity charged environment. You can have a fire, catastrophic fire. And the stress placed on a frame, if the structure pitch is greater than 8 degrees, that's going to affect the frame. But hydrogen is highly volatile, but only if it's mixed with air. Now I want to show you how this, I just took this demonstration here, if you could take a look at this. I just took a regular tube and I just covered it with some aluminum foil to demonstrate. Let's say this is the Hindenburg, right? All right, now you got it up in the air and you want to control it. You don't want it to go above 650 feet high. You don't want it to go over 300. What happens is you have 16 separate cylinders filled with hydrogen, okay? And then on the inside, you also have many water tanks. And then you also have diesel tanks in here because it's powered by 4 diesel engines on the outside, 2 on this side and 2 on the inside, okay? Now, typically hydrogen, of course, is lighter than air, and that's what makes it go up. All right, just want to demonstrate that. So, if it's going too high and hitting 600 feet, what do? Well, each one of these 16 individual cylinders have valves on them, and they have all the maintenance people on there are in charge of making sure the ship stays perfectly level while it's in its flight. So if it starts going too high, they release maybe one of the cells, some of the hydrogen, and it comes down a little bit, okay? Now, if it starts going too low with the weight, what are you going to do? Well, you have the water down in the tanks below, and you release some of the water, which releases the overall weight, and it goes up. Now, I mentioned pitch. Just want to describe it. Pitch means if it's going this way and it's not level, or if it's going this way and it's not level. You have to control that too. And that's why you have these individual cylinders. For instance, if this pitch here starts going up too high, then you release some hydrogen in that one and it will bring it down again. If it starts going too low, a water tank on the bottom side, you release the water there and it'll go back up. The other structural problems are, of course, if you go over 660 feet high, the structure of it is going to weaken. And the other problem you have is, once again, the pitch, too high or too low, greater than 8 or less than 8 degrees, that's going to affect it too. And the other thing that's going to affect it is, and this is important here, you'll see later when it approaches Lakeville, you have to make a sweeping slow turn. And they didn't do that when they were Lakeville as a problem. They made a quick turn, and that affected all the structure in it, and that's one of the reasons we had some problems. So that's how they control it. How many people do they have? It's a crew of 54. First you have a deck department, and they're in charge of navigation and weather forecasting. Then you have an engineering department. They maintain these 4 engines and also watch out for the airship structure. Make sure none of these braces collapse. course, you have stewards and cooks to serve the passengers. They have a deck crew now. Who's in the deck crew? You've got navigators, helmsmen, radio operators, ruddermen, elevatormen. The idea is to control the Hindenburg direction and altitude 24 hours a day. Engineering crew. They do all the mechanics on these four. Obviously, you have to have these motors running. And in the top left, you can see one of the motors outside the Hindenburg. And they have flight engineers, electricians, and riggers. Now, here's a picture on the right, just one of the motors. Look how large that is. Diesel powered. And they have 3 mechanics for each propeller. There's 4 of these propeller units to control the Hindenburg speed and direction. Now they have walkways. The mechanics, everyone's inside this enclosure when it's in flight. And the mechanics, you can see I circled it on the left there. There's one of the mechanics. All there is a kind of an open ladder, if you will, and he has to walk outside over the Atlantic Ocean over there to do the maintenance. And they do this 24 hours a day, making all their adjustments. Once again, the control system, the 16 flammable hydrogen-filled gas bags. And the interesting thing here is this original design was to use helium, which is non-flammable. But the problem with the helium is it's heavier than the hydrogen, which means they can have less capacity for the crew, for people, whatever like that. So they really wanted the helium, though, because it was safer. And, of course, you have water tanks we described and diesel fuel tanks for all the engines. And, of course, the other problem you got to compensate for, the diesel oil is used up when you're powering all 4 of these motors on a long trip. So when the diesel oil is used up, what's going to happen? The weight goes down and the airship rises, and so you've got to compensate for that by letting off one of the bags of hydrogen. And you can see one of the hydrogen tanks. That's what it looks like. The 2 red arrows point to it. Now let's get a comparison here. I did a comparison here between the Hindenburg and the Goodyear blimp that everybody sees in a lot of sporting events and things. There's your blimp up there, and there's the size of the Hindenburg. Hindenburg length, 804 feet, Goodyear blimp, 192. So it's 4 times Hindenburg. Height, 147 feet, and the blimp's only 50 feet high. Diameter, 135 feet for the Hindenburg. The blimp's only 50-foot diameter. Now, there's a frame, the duralumin bracing on the Hindenburg. There's no frame at all in the Goodyear blimp. You lose air, you're going down. And there's gas, unfortunately, with the Hindenburg, it's hydrogen, and the Goodyear blimp has this non-flammable helium. Now, inside the Hindenburg, we're going to look inside here. Here's a passenger window view. They keep the altitude between 330 feet and 600 feet. And you can see the passengers there looking outside. Incredible, incredible view. And there are the passengers from the outside looking in. They said it's the most incredible view, and because it's so controlled, it said you could actually stand up a fountain pen on one of the tables in the Hindenburg and would never fall over. That shows you all the engineering designed for this airship. And here's the inside design. We're going to start on the left side, and we'll work our way in the squares all the way around. On the bottom, you got the promenade deck. This is all inside now. And then windows that we just showed. Up on the top, you got your dining room. Then you have all these individual passenger cabins inside. Then you have reading and writing room. And then going down, you have the smoking lounge, which we'll talk about. Then you have the promenade deck, and below the entrance where the passengers come in before it takes off. And here's the actual picture of inside the passenger dining area. And they have all duralumin furniture. All the chairs are all lightweight. All the tables are lightweight. Doing everything they can to keep the ship as light as it is. And what do they have? Well, you can see the tables all set up there. Here's your typical dinner menu. I'm not so sure I'd want to go eat there, but anyway, here we go. Beef broth with marrow dumplings, venison with orange gravy, beef steak with goose liver sauce, meatballs and caper sauce, vegetables and thick cream sauce. A lot of the Americans preferred probably not to eat this. But they had all these cabin features. Let's see how narrow it is in between all the individual cabins. And what you would do at night, like this fella is, take your shoes off, just put them in the hallway, and when they get up in the morning, they'd all be shined. All kinds of luxurious features on this. And here's inside the cabin. There's your duralumin construction. Everything's all lightweight. There's 2 bunk beds, a little bit of a desk here. You've actually got a sink. That's how people traveled. Smoking lounge. You're saying, I can't believe they have smoking on flammable hydrogen type of thing. Well, they do. What they did is they pressurized the cabin, which keeps the hydrogen out in case there was a hydrogen leak inside the Hindenburg. We'll go to the next. Here we go. There's a picture of folks that are actually inside there playing cards and smoking cigars. You can see the arrow on the right that's pointing to a set of double doors. And what they had is room was pressurized to keep the hydrogen out, double door entrance chamber, and they had a crew member 24 hours a day outside the door to make sure no one forgets that they have a cigar in their hand or something like matches or something like that and goes outside that door. And that's how they did it. Another interesting thing, this was the first piano ever to be airborne in an airplane or any type of a plane. And it's all made out of duraluminum. It's very light, but it's quite the scientific development, and apparently it sounded really good. Hindenburg tickets. Here we are over in Germany now. There's down below the Zeppelin company, and people are lining up to get their tickets. And there's a picture on the top. That's the hangar inside in Frankfurt, Germany. And I got a copy of the typical ticket that's over there on the right. Got a couple arrows. You can see the ticket goes from Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Frankfurt, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Here's your ticket. And I wanted to find out, 1936, the Hindenburg made the first trip to the United States. A lot of people think it was only 1937, but no, they made it a year earlier. And a round trip ticket in 1937, actually, it cost $1,350. And I looked that up, and today's money, 2022, a ticket, round trip from Europe to the United States and back to Europe costs $26,900 if you do it today. So only the expensive rich folks got a chance to ride the Hindenburg. And here's a picture of it across the Atlantic Ocean. What I circled there, of course, are 2 of the motors, which are mounted outside the superstructure, and there's 2 on the other side of this. No passenger was ever airsick. Now, a lot of people get airsick on the Queen Mary. And the ship, and why? Because the Germans had this control system which kept the airship less than 8 degrees, completely level all times through all weather conditions and everything you could go. You can see how low it's flying. You actually see the water all the way over. And here's a great picture. This is 1936, year before the actual Hindenburg crashed. New York City, you can see how low they are. And they typically went across that so they could see, all these people could actually see below, and a tremendous view. And I took a few of these pictures. Here it is, their first voyage over Baltimore. And there's a picture of that tower. So I went online and said, I wonder if that tower's still today. And I put the picture on the right. There it is today. And there's a picture of the first flight of the Hindenburg over Baltimore, Maryland. Then it continued on, Princeton University. This was a challenge to get the pictures of those shaded buildings, but I think I came pretty close on the right in 1936. And of course, all the students, they knew when it was coming over. They were all outside watching it. Here it is, another shot, Princeton. I think I really hit it today with where it actually flew over on the right. The buildings almost look exactly like it was. Now it's coming to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Okay, the first flight, there's arrows pointing to the Hindenburg, and there's an arrow down below, which is actually this huge hangar, which is down in New Jersey. And then there it is. It landed in Hindenburg in 1936. You can see the size of it, unbelievable. And you can see, we'll go over this again in the next episode. You can see I put down here, I put in squares, all the people down below pulling the ropes, and on the right pulling the ropes, and I showed the arrows. Once it gets to a certain elevation, they drop all these lines to guide it in, and they have to anchor it right to the superstructure. And that's where they anchor it at the top, the nose of it, and that's what it looks like on the left there. The actual thing that clips right on there, 7 stories high. So this is episode 1, the first trip of the Hindenburg from Germany to the United States. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to have quite a few more episodes on this, and you'll see why this is the New England story in history. Once again, Dave Norton from Discovering New England History. Have a good evening.